Hey guys, how's it going? It's Luke here for our Monday Night Football live stream between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. What we're going to do is we're going to quickly go through my projections one last time, see if there's any changes in terms of the injury report that changed things around, any target shares I allocated one way or another, my favorite picks for the captain slot. If you guys have any Q&A, as always, feel free to go ahead and put that down in the chat. We'll get to any of your questions live. We're also going to talk some game theory at the end as well. Some of my favorite game flows I expect, some of my favorite targets in terms of stacking, all of that kind of good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and start with my projections. So let me go ahead and share my screen here for you guys. There we go. Cool. So here's our projection screen. So we're going to go position by position here, going through some of my favorite targets. So at the QB slot, I actually like both of these targets in this game. Aaron Rodgers a little bit more than Jared Goff, as you can see with the projections. And the price tag on Jared Goff's pretty nice as well. So I like trying to squeeze them both into lineups tonight. I have Aaron Rodgers at over 300 yards passing. You can see Jared Goff not really getting it done in terms of the passing yards, but because they are playing from behind, I do expect him to be able to throw at least a few touchdowns tonight, even if it ends up being in garbage time. Jared Goff also has a little bit of rushing upside as well, as I expect him to run the ball about 3-4 times tonight. And depending on whether the bootlegs end up being wide open or not, he can end up putting up a decent amount of yardage as well. So I like going to both the quarterbacks. I like sneaking them both into lineups. So as a result, I'm trying to find a cheaper captain in a good amount of my lineups tonight. Again, we'll talk about that at the end with the captain slot, some of the game theory notes and stuff. But I think trying to fit both those quarterbacks in is going to be extremely important. Now getting down to these running backs, we have Aaron Jones spearheading the way there, by and far the best running back prospect on this slate, but I'm not necessarily sure you're going to need the running back position tonight. You might need a cheaper running back option, somebody like DeAndre Swift. Actually, this price right here, Jamal Williams, is incorrect, by the way. I believe wide receiver ones are right. Sorry about that, guys. Everything else on the sheet should be correct. This price for AJ Dillon, I believe, is incorrect as well. So ignore that. I do know that Jamal Williams is $7,400. The projections are correct though. So you can see DeAndre Swift, I have projected lower than Jamal Williams. A lot of that has to do with the injury. You have DeAndre Swift a little bit limited, hasn't practiced fully this week, and Jamal Williams was a little bit banged up at the beginning of the week, was on the injury report, but was taken off of it by Thursday. So he's clearly the more healthy of the two backs, and we saw Jamal Williams get quite a few carries there in week one. So tonight, I have him projected for 2 more carries than DeAndre Swift. Still expect them to run the ball quite a bit, unless they end up being behind 2 or 3 touchdowns. But again, we'll get to the game flows later on. You're going to be playing these Detroit running backs in a little bit of a more unique build, right? One where you expect the Lions to get out to a better start than Vegas and most of the people believe in. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit later on. You could go to AJ Dillon. I don't have his price here. Let's go ahead and look that up just so that you guys have it for your projections there. So 1 second. He's got to be so he's $3,000, guys. Sorry about that. Thought I had all that updated. I mean, $2,000. I don't hate him. Again, he got about 5 carries in week one. I believe 4 or 5 carries. I'd have to check to be exact, but they had already stated that they wanted to run the ball more, but they were losing by a shit ton against the New Orleans Saints. So couldn't really run the ball there in week one. We don't necessarily know the kind of spread they're going to use between not offense and defense, between passing and running, because they haven't been in a competitive game. But all the coach speak to this point has been that they want to use Dillon as a little bit of thunder to Aaron Jones's lightning. So I do have him projected for 8.1 points, and at $3,000, he could really help you fit in 2 of those quarterbacks into the same lineup tonight. Let's go on to the wide receivers, though. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. I do expect a lot of the offense in this game to come through the air. So as a result, I am looking at a lot of these pass catchers rather than those running backs, especially Davante Adams. I mean, I have him projected for 23.5 points right now. Let's go ahead and scroll over here to get the receiver stats on the board for you guys. Here you go. So you guys can see I have him for 12 targets tonight, and honestly, that could be a little bit low. This is a huge bounce back spot for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he looked dreadful in week one. People were calling for his head, asking if he's washed up, all those kind of things, which we know are ridiculous. I mean, people that look into stats, people that just use logic in general know that people are going to have bad games. So this is a great spot to bounce back and buy back in on these pass catchers. So I have him for 11.5 catches, over 100 receiving yards. So is going to get the bonus there as well. 1.5 touchdowns, probably going to get, his at least one in this game. I think he gives you a very solid floor. I also have one of those wild cards on DraftKings where if Devontae Adams ends up scoring 2 touchdowns tonight, I end up earning $50 DK or something like that. So I wouldn't hate that either. So go Devontae Adams. Number 2 option would be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a little bit more of a deep threat option, a little bit more boomer bust as a result. But on Showdown, that's exactly kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody that can go out, get a 60, 70-yard touchdown, and get all of their production in one play. So with Aaron Rodgers stacks, I like going to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And if you end up using him as your number 1 on Green Bay rather than Devontae Adams, you also end up in a situation where you can easily play both quarterbacks, even go to one of those expensive running back options, and have a quite unique build that way. So I am starting some lineups with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but Devontae Adams is pretty hard to avoid on this slate, especially given his projection. Getting down to Allen Lazard, he is a clear number 3 option for this Green Bay offense. Going to get a few more targets and receptions than Valdes-Scantling come the end of the year, but I think the matchup's a little bit tough against this Lions defense. They have very solid slot corners, very solid covered linebackers as well. So I do expect them to spread out the Green Bay offense just a little bit more than they're used to. So a few more targets going Scantling's way this week and Adams' way this week, but going forward, you are going to see Lazard get a few more targets than those other, not than Devontae Adams, but by at least Scantling in most weeks going forward. Khalif Raymond, we actually haven't heard of yet. As of right now, I do have him projected as in, even though he is questionable, has been a limited participant this week. He's not really going to be a big part of the offense, even if he plays, right? So I have him projected at just 6 targets for 3.5 catches. Isn't the most efficient wide receiver over there in the Lions offense. Somebody I'm a little bit more excited about, though, is Quintez Cephas. So at $3,800, I have him projected for an even 10 points tonight. Going to get plenty of targets, especially if Raymond doesn't play. So we're going to have to keep, our eyes posted on that. I haven't gotten any tweets or anything. Let me know that Raymond is officially out. So until then, I only have him projected for 10 points. But if Raymond were to go out, give 2 or 3 of those targets, that we're going to go Raymond's way to Cephas. If you guys were watching my values video from earlier this week, you guys saw Amari Ross St. Brown did make that video. Is a rookie for this team, somebody that, they obviously put a lot of draft potential into, a lot of capital as well on that end. And they're expecting big things from him. He's all these young wide receivers seem to be studs right out of the gate. So Amari Ross St. Brown, while he didn't have a very flashy week 1, did end up being targeted quite a bit. So at 5.5 targets and 3.5 catches, he's not going to pop in your projections by any means, but at $2,400, he gives you a ton of salary relief that you very well might need on this kind of slate. I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any questions in chat. And I'll remind you guys, if there's any questions that you guys have as we're going through all these picks, make sure to go ahead and throw them down there. It could be one-on-ones. It can be game theory related, whatever it is, we'll get to it. Now going down to Randall Cobb. If you watched the values video as well, I was also very high on Randall Cobb. But as I've gone through the week, as I've gone through my target share analysis, I have cooled a little bit on Randall Cobb. So still an 8.2 point projection right there, but there's just so many bodies on this Green Bay offense that I'm not sure he's really going to get there in terms of a ceiling. So you also have Malik Taylor, you can see right there, Amari Rodgers as well, all on the Green Bay Packers. So they do have a very deep position there, not much talent, but they do have a lot of bodies there at wide receiver, which is going to limit the upside of some of these receivers. I don't mind taking one of them as a flyer play. You're just going to have to make sure that you take the right one. And for me at this point, I do think that is Randall Cobb. He's the safety blanket. He's been around for Aaron Rodgers for quite some time now. He is a little bit more expensive than Malik Taylor and Rodgers, but you do get a little bit more safety and a little bit more consistency out of somebody like him. So I want to go to one of these wide receivers, lump in Amari Ross St. Brown in that kind of area as well. I need one of them in my lineups, at least for salary constraints. It's just kind of hard to choose between them. So pick your poison tonight, kind of hope and pray. On Showdown slates, it's kind of what you have to do sometimes. What I would recommend is if you're going to put in $20 worth of lineups tonight, especially because there is so much volatility, go ahead and turn that into $4 or $5 entries or something like that. I think that's a much better way to attack this kind of slate that has this kind of volatility. Unless you're playing something like cash, then you go ahead and play just the highest median projection, right? I don't have a problem with that, but in GPP formats, it is going to be especially volatile tonight. Now going on to the tight end range for tonight's slate. Actually, we'll stop for a question before we do that. What is your new 1, 2, 3 as far as value? So good time to ask that, especially as we went right through these wide receivers. I would say my number 1 tonight, if you're going to count Quintez Cephas as a value play, I would say Quintez Cephas. So he's $3,800. I have him projected for 10 points. If Khalif Raymond ends up out, he's even more so a good play. But again, he's $3,800, so I'm not sure if you consider that a value play. My number two, I would say, would be Amari Ross St. Brown. Same kind of situation, right? If Cleve Raymond's out, they become the clear, 1 and 2 wide receiver threats on that team. The best receiver threat, period, on the team is going to be TJ Hawkinson, but you still got to have wide receivers out there in this speedy offense, the new type of, quick pass offense. So I do like both of those options, especially if Raymond's out. So they would be my 1 and 2. And number 3, Randall Cobb, right? I don't hate the thing. I've cooled a little bit on him. He was my number 1 option before, just not quite number 1 anymore. How do you figure weather into this? Not looking too good. I think it's a little bit early in the year for us to make any drastic differences in terms of the weather. Going to be a little bit windy. I think that's what you're talking about in terms of the weather that we're seeing. Could be a little bit rainy as well. That means there's going to be more short passes, right? So perhaps getting a little bit of a boost to these guys like Randall Cobb, Amari Ross St. Brown. They're going to be running these short passes, potentially even the tight ends as well, because the tight ends aren't necessarily taking these 50, 60-yard bomb routes or anything like that. So in windy conditions, those guys that run these shorter routes. So I haven't done so yet. I haven't made a huge drastic change to any of my projections. Again, I think it's a little bit early in the year. It's not cold or anything like that. Typically the temperature makes a little bit more of a difference than the wind when it comes to football. Are you not sold on Mercedes Lewis tonight? He's like my number 4 or 5 option, right? Just because of the Cleve Raymond situation. I think there's a few more injury situations that opened up than I was at least expecting to begin with. I'm okay with him, right? He's one of those options that you can kind of scatter him down low. We just haven't gone to the tight ends, right? So let me get to the tight ends. We'll talk about them now. I'm still on Mercedes Lewis, right? You can see I have him at 5.9 points down here. Let's go ahead and go through the tight ends now that we're talking about them. We have TJ Hawkinson at $9,600. He's one of my favorite plays on this slate, especially because we're expecting this Lions offense to have to play from behind. So I think he's going to get plenty of targets tonight. You can see I have him for 11 targets, 8.5 catches, just over 90 yards, which would actually be a downgrade from what we saw for him in week 1. So could very well smash that projection. I have him projected for about a touchdown in 70% of games, which honestly, very solid floor right there. Somebody who's definitely going to get his licks tonight. And it's not like the Green Bay linebacker core is anything special. They're very average in terms of their coverage ability. So I do think Hawkinson has a very productive night. Going over to the Green Bay side of things, I do like Robert Tanyan. He's more of a touchdown reliant player, somebody who most of his fantasy production last year came via touchdown. So not going to get a ton of yardage, not going to get a ton of looks, but worth going to in Showdown just because we saw the ceiling in a few games last year. Had a few 2-touchdown games, had a 3-touchdown game at one point that helped me take down a GPP on the main slate last year. So don't hate them either. Now going over to Mercedes Lewis and Darren Fells, I'm about even on both of these guys, right? They're the number 2 tight end options on their teams. Sorry, it's not Lucis, it's Lewis, right? Perhaps Lewis a little bit more just because of the price difference. You get up $600 off. I think more people are going to go to Fells than Lewis just because he's a little bit younger. They expect him to be a little bit bigger part of that Lions offense. You can see both projected for 3 targets, just over 2.5 catches. They're at least going to catch the targets that are thrown to them just because they're a little bit more reliable in terms of their hands. Not a ton of receiving yards, not a ton of touchdowns. Meh, right? I'm very lukewarm on them. I'll be using them if I had GPP lineups in terms of mixed multi-entry, but in terms of one single main GPP lineup or a cash lineup, I don't know if they make it into those builds. So if that answers your question there. Now let's get down to the kickers and the defenses, the favorite parts of our slates, right? Just kidding. You can play them if you want to. I don't think they're anything special. We saw a ceiling performance from the kickers on last Thursday night. We've seen it from time to time from some of the longer kickers. And it's very hard to predict, right? I go ahead usually if I'm max multi entering one of these contests, I'll play 20% of each kicker, right? Down to the defense, I'll play 15% of each defense or something like that. I don't take hard stands on them unless there's some drastic game flow I expect to happen or some drastic situation in terms of the kicking situation. It just doesn't happen very often. So very lukewarm on those plays right there. If you're in cash, I do like going to the kickers. I expect this game to be in the 50, maybe 55 point terms of over under. And in games like that, you're looking at 7 to 8 points for each kicker. That's going to be the median projection. You can see that's why I have them for 8.5 and 7.5 points right there. Not going to break the bank by any means, but in cash games, a little bit more viable than they are in GPPs. The defenses, it's pretty much touchdown or bust, right? We know this at this point. They have to go out there, get a defensive touchdown, 2 or 3 turnovers forced, that sort of thing. And that is even more difficult to predict than these kickers. So not high in either of them. If I'm going to go to either, it is going to be the Lions, though, just because of the price tag. A good $2,200 cheaper than the Packers team. And the predictions and the median predictions are relatively close. So, yeah, I don't hate going to the Lions defense. Packers defense at $5,000. No, thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see if there are any questions in the chat. If not, we're going to go over to the game theory section of this. This is the most important part of the video, in my opinion, just because I can tell you all the median projections in the world. And at the end of the day, they don't necessarily matter. When it comes down to Showdown, when it comes down to DFS for a single game, it is much more about using scenarios to your advantage. It's about thinking about very specific outcomes, different game flows that will be likely to occur. And if you're able to nail one of those game flows, that's really the key to taking down a GPP. So let's talk about a few of the game flows that I will be implementing for tonight. First and foremost, the chalk game flow, right? That is going to be a huge aerial assault by Aaron Rodgers against this Lions defense, likely getting out to a large lead. And the Lions happen to play from behind throughout the year. So a game flow like that, you'd be looking at one of the pass catchers for Green Bay likely being the optimal captain, perhaps even Aaron Rodgers if he spreads it around well. My bet in that scenario would be Davante Adams, right? Probably catches a touchdown or two, puts up well over 100 yards. That's who I'm targeting in that type of game flow. As for run backs, Jared Goff's an obvious choice. We're probably looking at one or two of those wide receivers, maybe TJ Hawkinson if you end up having enough salary in that scenario. And in that type of game flow, it's going to be relatively high scoring, right? So we're not looking for defenses. We're not really looking for kickers in that type of game flow. We're looking to target skill position players and mostly wide receivers, right? You can go to Hawkinson at tight end, maybe even Robert Tanyan as a buyback tight end. But that would be game flow number one, right? Onslaught by the Green Bay Packers, probably the most likely for tonight and probably the most chalky as a result. So I'm not thrilled about it. I will be playing it just because that's what a lot of the predictions and a lot of the projections play out. Something that's a little bit more interesting to me is let's talk about a game where it's a little bit more competitive, right? A little bit back and forth. Again, this isn't going to be very unique. A lot of people will play stacks like this, even in games with a higher over-under, a higher spread like this game. So if the Lions end up being a little bit competitive in this game, end up coming out, showing us a little bit on offense. I mean, they did in week one, right? They were were surprisingly efficient with that offense. A lot of people were giving Jared Goff shit in the offseason, myself included, right? That you really couldn't get it done over there in Detroit. They don't have any offensive weapons or anything. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? Cleve Raymond right now is their number one wide receiver. We don't even know if he's playing tonight. But Cleve Raymond, if he's your number one wide receiver, I mean, you're in trouble. So if it ends up being a close game, though, Jared Goff could very well end up being the optimal captain, right? That means that he's probably throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns, throwing for around 300 yards as well. So I don't necessarily hate going to him at captain. In those lineups, you're obviously wanting to stack up some of those wide receivers, probably TJ Hawkinson as well. And in terms of buybacks, I mean, they're going to have to throw to Davante Adams an absolute shit ton, right? In competitive games, Davante Adams only gets that much better. And in that type of situation, I would expect him to get 15, even 16 targets, probably around 150 yards, well over that 2 touchdown mark. So if there's any type of situation where the Lions are in this game, I'm targeting Davante Adams, perhaps at even the captain slot. You can end up using Davante Adams as captain, running Jared Goff, a lot of those Detroit wide receivers, and running out a lineup in that kind of game script. But the most interesting game script for me tonight, the one that I'm going to be targeting a whole crap ton, is going to be if the Lions get out to a lead and spank the Green Bay Packers, just like the Saints did in week one, which would it really be that hard to believe for that happening again? The Saints got smacked here in week 2, didn't look very great. So the Lions, right? They could go ahead and do that as well. We've seen crazier things happen in the NFL. And it's crazy to me. This stack on the Lions side is completely being overlooked tonight. I think a lot of people are expecting Green Bay to go out there and spank these Lions. Like a lot of the median projections span out. But again, we have to consider all of the outlier performances as well. And if the Lions go out and have a great day, you're essentially going to want to be ignoring Aaron Jones, right? In that kind of game script, they're not going to be running the ball very much. Sure, they might throw it to him a little bit out of the backfield, but Aaron Jones becomes pretty much useless in that scenario. TJ Hawkinson's probably absolutely destroying Green Bay if they're getting out to a huge lead. You're probably looking at one of those wide receivers having a ceiling performance as well. But most importantly, if you guys saw my video earlier this week, I'm huge on Jamal Williams, right? The guy's extremely efficient on the ground, averages over 6 yards a carry over the last 2 years. And if we take a look at his receiving production as well, very sure-handed, makes people miss in the open field. I really like Jamal Williams if the Detroit Lions get out to a very hot start tonight. I like him even if they don't. I do like his production out of the backfield. I think he has a high floor as a result. But that would be a different way to take a look at this contest. So going to go ahead and see if there's any questions in the chat. If not, I'm going to hop on out of here. I'm going to work on some of this Ryder Cup content for this week. We have that coming out. We have football season for week 3 coming out. Showdown stuff coming out for Thursday night football, Sunday night football, and Monday night football next week. So lots of content coming out for you guys. I appreciate you guys stopping by as always. If you guys haven't liked and subscribed to the channel already, I really appreciate it and honestly recommend that you guys do so, right? If you guys go ahead and do so, you're going to get notified when I upload in the future. It also helps me out with growing the channel, so I appreciate that. We do have a last question here before we get out of here. In the scenario with the Lions winning, what is your captain? So kind of mentioned that, right? So Davante Adams, if they're losing, they're going to really have to go to him a lot. More than likely, though, it is Jared Goff. So that was my initial reaction there. That's my initial take there. Just because in that scenario, Jared Goff, he doesn't really have that number one wide receiver, that guy who's going to go out, score 2-3 touchdowns like a Davante Adams can. So he's going to spread it around a little bit, probably going to throw 3 touchdowns in that scenario. Also has some rushing upside. So long answer, Jared Goff. Short answer, you could go with Davante Adams. But again, thank you guys for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time.